Welcome back, junkies. This is the Daily Wealth Junkies Show. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Brandon Dukeman here with Will Harvey, and we have an awesome, very interesting guest here for you today. We're excited to get rolling with him. But first, don't forget to subscribe to our show so that way you're not missing any of our daily episodes, and rate and comment so guests like ours today know how they're doing. And so do we. And join us on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/wealth junkies. Will, let's get started and who we have today.
Today on the show, Brandon, we have Ken Wentworth. He goes by Mr. Biz, and we're really excited to talk to him. So he's authored 2 best-selling business books and has broken 6 world records. And I haven't even asked him about that or what they are. So we're going to hear it just first time when you are as well. So he's also rose in a past life, has rose into the top 3% at a Fortune 15 company. So with that, Ken, thanks so much for coming on the show. Can you just give the listeners a little bit more about your background and what got you to where you are today?
Yeah, thanks, guys. I'm honored to join the show. Look,
sure.
The background. I worked in the corporate world again, as you mentioned, for 20. It's called 20 plus. Let's just leave it at that.
Don't date yourself here.
Yeah, 20 plus years. Had a great time there, but just had reached a point where. Ironically enough is, I was in the top 3% of people in the company. My boss tells me that he's putting me up for the next level, which would get me in the top 1%.
Wow.
And at that meeting was the second time in about 3 months I had come up with a revenue generating idea that was going to be shelved because of bureaucracy, red tape. And literally, I'm a very decisive person, sometimes maybe even to a fault. So I'm in New York City, and I'm leaving the 48th floor of home office, and I go and get in an elevator, and I got to go to another building. My elevator arrived from the 48th floor down to the first floor. I decided I was going to resign.
How long of a time frame is that? Is it a quick elevator, slow elevator? I mean,
well, there's a bunch of stops
floor.
in between.
Okay.
It's relatively speaking, it was pretty quick.
Yeah.
So as each little floor light at the top lights up, your brain is like, okay, that's okay. It's a little more.
Exactly. And I can't imagine the people were getting on and off the elevator that saw me, especially the ones that knew me, because I probably looked like someone with a big light bulb on top of my head, like my brain's just churning, the little rats running around on the wheel and whatnot.
Right.
And then I get to the airport, later that day, I go through all my meetings and I'm coming back, flying back home, and I get to LaGuardia. And I call my wife and I'm like, hey, I'm going to be up for managing director. And, she's like, oh my gosh, great. All your hard work, blah, blah, blah. And I said, by the way, I'm going to leave. And she goes,
how'd that conversation go?
Yeah. What? She goes, oh, you got to go. Your plane's taking off. And I'm like, oh no, I'm going to resign. And there's dead silence. And she goes, did you get to the airport early? Have you been drinking?
Oh, wow.
I said, no. And she said, well, why don't you take a nap on the plane ride home and we'll talk about it when you get home. And once I got home and explained it to her, I just got to a point where I knew I had I had a great career, nothing bad to say about it, but I just knew that I could do more. I could make a bigger impact. And it wasn't even about, a lot of people talk about the freedom and all that stuff, which is fantastic, of course, but it was more the impact. I knew I could be impacting more people. And I knew especially with those 2 ideas, getting shelved because of, a bunch of crap, that it was going to continue to happen. And I was going to continue to be up against that wall and frustrated and wanting to make a bigger impact and help more people. And I knew it just wasn't going to happen there. So next time I went back, about 3 weeks later, told my boss, I'm going to resign. I don't even know what I'm going to do next. So I'll stick around as long as you want. And we started, and he got up and closed the door and he's like, this is not typically the conversation I have when I tell someone they're going to be a managing director. That's not usually how it goes. So I explained it to him and he was like, yeah, you're right. I get it. And so that's how the whole sort of transition, the decision process happened and all that.
So, wow. I mean, like you said, you made that decision without really having any idea of what you were going to do.
Right. Yeah.
Wow.
I just knew, I'm a fairly confident person. And I firmly believe, and I think we all have this in us. Each and every person has this in them. I use this illustration. If you really think back in your life of anything that you have gone all in on, and when I say all in, I mean like all in. Not like, man, I really want to do this. Man, like I have to freaking do this. Everyone
Right.
has a few of those in their life, and probably only a few. But how many times in those instances were you unsuccessful? I'm willing to bet that you're probably
That's so
100%.
true.
Right.
You're 100%.
Yep.
You just don't realize, and you don't give yourself credit that you have that capability. So I knew I would figure it out. I knew I would. I've challenged myself in those ways in the past with world records and things like that. So I knew I'll figure it out. I know that I'll figure it out. I don't know what the heck it's going to look like, but I know I'm going to get there.
I love that. You resonate with me right now because I've always been a burn the ships kind of guy where it's just on to the next one. I've always been told I'm impulsive, and so no, that's really cool. So how long did you stick around when you told him that that you were willing to stick around? How long was that?
So yeah, it actually became a little bit frustrating, frankly, because that was in March. I was on board until beginning of December.
Okay. When
And
was this? What year was this?
this was 2015.
Okay.
2015. So
Early 15. Okay.
yeah, so in the beginning, he hired my replacement, brought a super smart person in. They took over, and I'm still going into the office here in Columbus, Ohio. I had teams in 6 different cities, different continents, all kinds of craziness. But I was still going into the office, of course, right? Well, I had nothing to do.
Mm-hmm.
The new guy came in, took over. Well, what happened was I had people from my Columbus team coming into my office, frankly, complaining about the new guy. And I'm like, well, this isn't productive, right? This isn't
Right.
good for the team. So I call my boss. I'm like, look, man, I gotta have you got to give me some stuff. I'm eager. I want to do something.
Yeah.
Well, we got some stuff coming down the pike. Just hold tight. And I said, well, I'm gonna quit coming to the office. At first, I came in the office like 3 days a week, and then finally, I'm like, I'm not coming to the office anymore. It's disruptive to the new guy, et cetera, et cetera. So it's like out of sight, out of mind. So here I am, still collecting a paycheck every 2 weeks.
Wow,
That's crazy.
And I'm not doing anything. Like I'm managing. This is again 4 years ago, and we were still using BlackBerries back then. But I'm managing. I had my laptop, and I was, I log into it every day. And then after a while, I stopped logging into it. And I log in at lunchtime, and then it just sat in my laptop bag forever. And then I'm managing my business, my career off my
Mhm.
BlackBerry. I'm checking it, and I'm getting less and less emails because I'm getting taken off lists.
Right.
Right. And so, but I couldn't move forward and do anything new because I was still tied to them. And I kept calling them like, hey, you got to give me something. Like, what can I help with? And, just hang around. And so anyway, I hung around. It actually paid off. And I found out why he was doing it. I mean, he was very, very generous about it. He was keeping me on a payroll. He had to keep me past a certain date in order to be able to give me a bonus the next year.
That's cool. So he was looking out for you.
He was. He didn't tell me that at the time. So I'm getting more and more frustrated thinking,
Right.
what the hell? Like, I want to move on and do something here,
Yeah.
And he didn't even tell me around the middle of November, he called and he's like, hey, are you ready to quit? I'm like, are you kidding me? Like,
Finally.
Yeah. Thanks for asking.
He goes, well, so he said, yeah, send me an email, a resignation email, just keep it short and sweet. And he said, make your resignation effective December 1st. And I'm like, okay, that's oddly specific, but okay. And I think, as a matter of fact, if I remember correctly, December 1st was like a Sunday. So it wasn't even like an obvious day.
You're right.
Then he calls me in January, in the middle of January, and he's like, hey, by the way, you're going to notice a deposit into your bank account, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me, right? And he said, I needed you on the payroll on December 1st in order to be able to do that. So complete
That's
opposite
awesome.
of what you would typically hear.
Yeah.
From company,
Yeah. That's incredible. That's a
Usually
good
it's
opportunity.
Middle fingers are flying, and
Yeah.
people are fighting and screaming. It's not good. But that's really cool.
So what was, now that happened, what was your next plan? What was your next move? I mean, now that you had the time to figure things out.
Yeah, so in the fall of that year, when I had nothing to do, as a matter of fact, I was driving my wife nuts because I'm sitting around the house all day, and I can't just sit around the house. So I'm figuring out stuff. So my wife comes home, and I'm like, hey, come downstairs real quick. We have a finished basement. It's almost all completely finished. I'm like, come downstairs for a second. I'm like, I was thinking today, if I knock down this wall, run wiring over, my wife's like, you need to find something to do.
So you just have cabin fever.
Right. So I had never really had a mentor, embarrassing enough. I called him a career mentor anyway. And so I connected with someone and sat down and honestly had the, what do you want to be when you grow up kind of conversation with him. And it was a very fruitful exercise. And now that I've been through it, it sounds like completely obvious, but he's got this giant whiteboard in this conference room, and he goes all the way to the left side, and he said, "What was your first job you had?" And I said, "Well, when I got out of school, I went," and he's like, "No, no, no. The first job you had, like first thing you got paid for." And I was like, and by the way, this will date me, but I said, "Well, I was a paper boy. I delivered newspapers." And he was like, "Okay, cool." He writes down paper boy. He's like, "Tell me 3 things you loved about that, 3 things you hated about it." I'm like, "Okay." So he writes those down. We went to every single position I'd ever had in my career, keep going, left to right across the screen. And we got done, and he was like, "Okay, this is common. This is common." It circles all the commonalities on the likes and the dislikes. And he's like, "Well, we need to find you a job that you can do this, this, and this, and you don't have to do this, this, and this." I'm like, "Awesome. What the hell is that?"
Yeah.
And he was like, "Oh, you can be a fractional CFO, a part-time CFO for business. You can be a CFO for, 6, 8, 10 different businesses." And I said, "How the heck do you do that?" Like a one CFO, being CFO for one company is a 60, 70 hour a week job. Like, how do you do that for 6 or 8 companies? He's like, "No, you do it part-time." And once he explained to me, it made perfect sense, but I was completely naive to it, had no idea. And so I connected with a company that did that, hired folks that did that, talked to them. And it was funny. You talk about the entrepreneurial spirit just coming out. I mean, even backing up when I was at my Fortune 15 company, which was JP Morgan Chase, not a big secret, but I did my master's degree and they paid for it. And
That's
once
awesome.
I finished it, you had to stay for 2 years in order to not have to pay any of it back. So I literally set myself, and I'm like, "Okay, I got 2 years to figure out what I'm going to do." Right. And at the end, as soon as that 2 years is up, the day after it's over, I'm out.
I'm
I'm
out. Yeah.
cutting out of here. But a lot of things happened, and my career was like, I was doing a lot of cool stuff when that 2 years was up. So I continued, and then I frankly just procrastinated until I got to the point where I mentioned earlier. But talked to them, and the more I talked with the owner, I was asking questions and this, that, and the other. And he's finally, I think he got a little bit frustrated. He's like, "You know what, dude, you need to do this on your own." And I was like, "I thought this was going well. Like,
Yeah.
what the heck happened?" He said, "I can tell you could come with us and you'll be wildly successful, but 10 years from now, you're going to look back and you're going to say, 'What if?'" And he's like, "I don't want you to ever say 'what if.'" He said, "So go out, do it on your own." And he said, "By the way, I'll help you. There's plenty of fish in the sea." He's like, "Do it for a year. If you don't like it, come back and you can work with us." And I did. And I got my first client, and it was probably about 2 weeks into that first client. I was literally driving home, and it was just like that epiphany that everyone talks about. It's like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I knew,
No kidding.
without a shadow of a doubt, this is why I'm on the face of this earth. I absolutely love what I do, and I don't just say that lightly. It's not work. I mean, that whole cliche around,
Right.
if you find something you love to do, you never work a day in your life. I'm telling you, I'm living it. And
That's
I mean
cool.
that very seriously. I freaking love what I do. I didn't even know this level of career fulfillment was possible. I thought, my corporate career was great and fantastic. And I thought that was like as good as it gets, but it's not.
No
So
kidding.
That's awesome that you can find something that like you said, you actually love. Some people lie to themselves and say, "Oh, I love my job," but do you really
Right.
love your job? I mean, it's
Yeah.
so go ahead, Will.
No, I was just gonna probably say the same thing you were. What exactly were you doing?
in my corporate career,
No. For once you had that aha moment where it's like I'm doing exactly what I need to be doing. What were what's the nitty gritty on what that was?
yeah. So I work as a fractional CFO, part-time CFO, on-demand CFO. So I work with small business owners. So think of a typical small business to where they make widgets, they provide a service,
Right.
and they're really good at that, but they're not business people.
Mm.
And then maybe not as financially savvy, don't have the
Mhm.
business acumen. I come in and help them, again, as their CFO, but I just do it on a part-time basis. So a company that does, $5 million a year, $10 million a year probably doesn't need a full-time CFO as far as someone that they need for, 40, 50, 60 hours a week,
Right.
but they need someone with that acumen. And so that's where I come in and work
Okay.
with those owners and help them, through those different stumbling blocks, which is, again, why I love it. I love the different industries, different owners, different challenges. Everyone's got, obviously a different skill set. So some owners I have to really spoon feed and hold their hand a
Right.
little
I
more,
believe
right?
it. Yeah.
And then other ones are they're going to run a super tight ship, and so my engagement with them was just a little bit different. So, but it's awesome. I absolutely love it.
That's really cool. You're not bound to one company. You don't have to follow their rules and you know all of that stuff that you probably didn't like being at a big corporate giant. You know, you're kind of an independent contractor, if you will,
Yeah.
a consultant type of a role. That's really interesting. I never even knew that exists.
And I'll tell you, and again, I didn't either. I'll tell you one quick anecdote to that is my wife's a nurse, Mrs. Biz, as we call her.
Mrs. Biz.
Nothing to do with business, right? It was one of my first clients, and they were paying me an absolute crap ton of money. And that's a technical term, crap ton.
Crap ton. Heard it before. Yep.
Yeah.
They're paying me a bunch of money. And I come home from a board meeting, and it was in the evening. I get home late. You know, she says, well, how was the meeting? I go, I got to be honest with you. When I leave these meetings, I want to find the tallest building and jump off of it. It's freaking terrible. And she looks at me like I'm a complete idiot. And she goes, then don't work with them. And I said, but wait a minute. Wait a minute.
Yeah.
I don't have to.
Nope, not at all.
I was so used to in the corporate world, you know, Bob down the hallway, who's a big pain in your rear end, but your jobs intersect. So you just got to make it work with Bob.
Right. You're stuck
I was
with
so
Bob.
used to that. I hadn't shifted out of that paradigm. And so all of a sudden I look at my wife and I go, oh my gosh, you're a freaking genius. And so it's the only client I've ever fired. The next day I sent an email and I'm like, hey, I think we need to part ways. And I referred them to someone new and all that good stuff, but only client ever fired. And what I did from there, not only did I learn and got rid of them, but now as I was going forward and I would talk to other prospective clients, I knew some of the things that frustrated me with them to look for and say, I don't want to work with someone like that again. So now
that's true. I'm sure you learn a lot.
And just, you know, I only have to work with people that I really want to work with.
Right.
So that's another reason why I love my job. There's no Bob down the hallway anymore.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So if someone out there has a similar background as you, they're in the corporate world and they have a unique skill set and there's definitely value that they bring to the table and they want to do something like this. I mean, what did you do in terms of funding? What were the costs associated with getting going? Can you just kind of talk about that aspect of it and what you would do if you were them?
Yeah. So a great question because I learned a lot there too, right? That's the best thing in life, right? You always learn from these things. So school of hard knocks. So that company I was talking to that I almost went to work for them as a part-time CFO, he mentioned to me, he was like, yeah, you know, a lot of guys want to do this, but they don't want to fully do it on their own. And he's like, so most people don't want to invest like $100,000 to get this thing off the ground. When he said that, I thought, $100,000, like I can get this thing rolling for like 20.
Yep.
Maybe 25. I mean, I have to do some marketing. I got to put some stuff together. Like it won't be that big a deal. I was really wrong.
Really?
There's a reason why he had been in business for 15 plus years running his company, right? And he probably has some knowledge there, right? I honestly never went back and looked. I know that it was easily over $75,000. I don't know total, like getting things all going. And I had clients in between there, but as far as the full investment of everything I needed and to get things, all going, it was a lot more than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's, I mean, unfortunately, you know, you got to spend the money to get things done right. And you know, you can't half-ass the things, you know, I'm sure you maybe could have gotten it done for 20 grand, but you know, would you be where you are now? And would you be successful? No, probably not. You know?
Yeah, I think you're right. And it's funny you say that. It's one of the things I tell people all the time. I'm like, I don't half-ass anything. I'm full ass or no ass. So,
yep, absolutely. And we want all the ass. So
right, that's right. Of course we do.
So what were some of those? What were some of the things that you were spending that money on? Because from an outsider looking in, for me, I'm looking at it and thinking, well, there's no, you know, you're not developing software. There's no R&D. What is the cost there?
Yeah. So a lot of it was marketing and getting myself out there. It was traveling to events. You know, I've got clients all over the country. So that was part of it. Part of it was some of the infrastructure I had to buy, you know, writing a book. There's a whole the first book and the second book. I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes into that. And that's a lot more expensive than most people think. Even if you self-publish, there's a lot of expenses associated with that. I've got an online course. So working with a media company, preparing all of that content, going into a studio, for tens and tens of hours, producing, all those videos and then having them edited. And,
right.
That was pretty expensive as well. But it's an evergreen thing. So it's a great investment because those topics that I cover in this online course are all evergreen type things.
Nice.
I can continue to use that for, the next, 10 years
Absolutely.
or whatever. But
right.
a lot of those things. And again, I could have bootstrapped it, not done those things and just said, hey, let me get, 2 or 3 clients. And then as I build up some more money, I'll go out and then I'll do part of an online course. I'll do part. Again, I don't like the half-ass. I'm like, here's the vision I set out. I'm going to make it happen. And I guess in some ways I look at it from I guess I know a lot of people say it, but like Grant Cardone talks about looking at things. People look at things from a scarcity perspective or an abundance perspective. I look at it from abundance, like same thing. This is going to cost me all this money. I'm going to figure it out. I'll make the money. I'll figure out how to make the money.
Right.
And thankfully I did. But yeah, it was, that online course alone, that was a big chunk. That was a good bit of money. And I've got my own radio show. So there was some investment there up front, getting that all sort of established and, traveling around, trying to get the word around and get out of obscurity. People talk about, actually Grant Cardone talks about, if you have an expertise or a skill set where you can help people and you're not doing everything you can to get out of obscurity, right? If they don't know you, that you can't help them.
Right.
So
Very true.
Getting out of obscurity and doing that, figuring out ways to be able to do that. So going around to some national events and speaking at national events and things like that were pretty important, I think, in building the platform and all that kind of stuff.
That's awesome.
Yeah. But those are all things that, like you said, that need to get done to get your name out there to be able to help as many people as possible. So when did you coin the term, the name Mr. Biz? When I got to know.
Yeah. Well, thankfully I can say I didn't coin it.
Okay.
I firmly believe you can't make your own nicknames, right? So,
right.
No, it was part of when I was doing my radio show early on doing the radio show. I had someone who was a guest on the show and we're walking out of the studio and we're walking down the hallway. And as we're walking down, he asked me a question like something about marketing, something about financials, and then something about hiring people or something. I can't remember, but like 3 different topics while we're slowly walking down the hallway. We get to the end of the hallway where I'm kind of letting him, putting him back out in the lobby, so to speak. And he's like, man, that's awesome. He's like, about like everything. He goes, I feel like you're like Mr. Business or something. Well, the GM of the station happened to be walking by, not part of the conversation at all, but overheard it. And he stops and he goes, you're Mr. Biz. That's it. You're Mr. Biz. And I'm like, no, I'm not. And the guest said, oh yeah. He goes, you ever watch Sex and the City? And I said, as a matter of fact, no, I haven't. And he gave me your name card. Gave me your name card. He just lost it for 30 days. He's like, no, I watched it with my wife. I'm like,
sure you do.
And he said, no, there's a character on there called Mr. Big. And he said, people would probably associate that. And I'm like, well, is Mr. Big a jerk? And he's like, no, he's a really successful businessman. And I just brushed it off. I'm like, oh, that's, kind of laughed it off. Well, unbeknownst to me, the radio station starts promoting the show as featuring Mr. Biz.
Oh,
no
wow.
kidding.
I had no idea, right? So I don't know, probably a month after that original conversation, again, radio station said nothing else about it. I'm at a networking event here locally and someone comes up to me and they're like, hey, Mr. Biz. And I'm thinking, how the heck do they know? Like, that's a bunch of crap. Well, then I find out I'm in my vehicle driving around and I flip over to one of the stations that my show's on and I hear a spot for the show that says, join us this week. Mr. Biz will be talking. I'm like, oh, you gotta be freaking kidding me.
So that's awesome.
That's too funny. So yeah, I mean, it's a sticky name, and it, I'm sure it's helped with branding. It's short. It's, short and sweet. It's sticky. That's cool.
It has. I'm actually, in hindsight, I'm thankful for it, but it also puts some pressure, right? People go,
yeah,
you're Mr. Biz. You better know what the hell you're talking about.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Well, we were joking about that before the show started. You know, you're right now. If you guys aren't watching on the video, he's wearing a button down shirt and a tie, and he looks very professional. Whereas Brandon and I are in t-shirts and sweatpants.
Yeah.
And luckily, we're not Mr. Biz, so we don't have to dress like that and wear the suit and all that.
It's a
good
uniform.
stuff.
Yeah, it's on a uniform.
Yeah.
That's the
But-
only bad part about it. Yeah.
But they, it goes with the brand, and but that's awesome.
Exactly.
That's
Well,
awesome.
Tell us a little bit about the. I'm looking at your resume here. Tell us about the 6 world records that you broke. Gotta ask about that.
Excuse me. Yeah, so I got into, I'm and I've been lax on it comparatively speaking, but I used to go to the gym a lot, work out a lot, and got into working out with some guys that had competed in powerlifting. And so again, as I mentioned earlier, it's either full ass or no ass. And so I decided to go full ass. And I literally sat down and said, if I'm going to do this, I want to do something. I don't want to say, oh, I'm going to be in better shape. Like,
Right.
I have to do something. And so it's funny that the guy who was kind of my mentor in that sport, I sat down, I went and looked up what the world record was for my weight class in the bench press. And I said, I want to break this record. And he was like,
what was it?
He's like, okay, it sounds great, Sparky. So back then, I'm trying to remember the first one I broke. I'll tell you this much. The first time I bench pressed 275 pounds. And at that point I said, I want to bench press 500 pounds.
Unreal.
275 to 500. It's not,
Well, again, a long journey, right? But
Yeah.
I want to do this. And again, even the guys I train with, which are positive guys and everything, they didn't verbally say it, except for one guy. But the non-verbals, when I go, God, because here's the thing, I'm a firm believer in, you set a goal, like I tell everybody.
Yeah.
Because now I got accountability.
Absolutely.
Next time I run into you, you're going to say, hey, how's it coming along at 500? And if I'm failing, I have to tell you that I'm failing. And I don't want that.
Right.
So it increases the pressure on me and the accountability. And that's how I roll. I perform much better under that pressure, not wanting to let people down, not want to say I'm failing or whatever. And so I told all my training partners, and they're like, okay, that sounds good, buddy. Good luck with that.
Yeah.
Right.
So I set that goal, and that 500 was a goal. And then I thought, well, on the way, I'm going to start competing and going obviously to competitions. And I got to the point where, okay, I think I can go to the nationals and be competitive. And I went to the nationals out in Vegas back in, gosh, what year was that first one? Probably 98 or 99. Won out there, and I ended up winning.
No kidding.
And I wasn't expecting to win, and I won. Well, if you win the nationals, you get an invite to the world championships. And I'm like, well, you can't get an invite to the worlds and not go.
Right. Absolutely. You're going.
Who knows if I ever qualify again, right?
Right.
So I went to the worlds and I won. And so I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. Like this is really turning out pretty sweet. And of course, success just fuels the fire even more. Right. So I just kept going along. So I think the first world record I broke, I weighed 181 pounds, and I think I benched like 447.
That is insane.
Something like that. And I should mention, just for anyone out,
is ridiculous.
And I should mention, just for anyone out there, it's all drug free. It's all drug tested. I know the stereotype of the power.
There's a lot going on, a lot of controversy in that world.
300-pound dude with the bald head and the goatee and all that kind of stuff. And I used to have a goatee, I will admit that, but I was never 300 pounds. But yeah, so, and then after I started having success, then I'm like, well, how do I raise the bar? So I want to break world records in multiple weight classes. And so I ended up breaking world records at 181 pounds, 198 pounds. And then I never did 220, but I broke a world record in the 242 pound class. Although the most I ever weighed was like 230. So I was light in the class, but
wow.
That's awesome.
Did you end up, I got to ask, did you end up benching 500?
I did.
No
yeah.
Kidding.
Multiple times. Yeah. So the first time I did it, I weighed 230. I bench pressed 500 at 230. And then
That's crazy.
About I mean, how many years later, I guess, I benched, the best I ever did in competition was I benched 515 and I weighed 196.
That is
Wow. That's
wow.
crazy because so I used to play football and I was up at about 295 when I was playing, and the most I ever benched I think was like 325, 330, and I was playing offensive line, which is not, that's not really, as an offensive lineman, it's not really a huge number to bench press, but that was heavy as shit. But
Yeah.
and I could not imagine throwing a few extra plates on and having that bar bend.
Well, and
over.
he's like half your
Yeah,
weight.
exactly. He's benching
That's
500.
unreal.
Will, why you got to do that to
Yeah.
him? Why you got to do that,
So,
Will?
Sorry,
but no, but I think that it has a real value to the story. I mean, you like you said, you set the goal, you start telling everybody about it, and at that point, you're accountable for that goal because you just told a million people about your goal. Well, if you don't do it,
right.
you look like that guy.
Yeah, it got to the point where, like, when I would go to the competition, so the only place you can break a world record is either at the nationals or the world championship. So they have the qualified judges. There's a certain level of judges that need to be there and all that kind of stuff. And so that's the other thing too, is we've all seen guys in the gym that are bench pressing and they got their butts this far off the bench, and that stuff's not legal. Like in a competition, basically the only thing that can move are your arms. You can't be moving all over the bench. Your butt can't come up. You can't be shifting your feet and all this other crap. So, I mean, which adds a whole nother element to it. Anyone who's worked out and handled some decent weight, I mean, that makes it.
Yeah.
But, I started doing that, and I was going to nationals and worlds every year, and I would set I would tell people that I work with, even back, my corporate days, people I work with, they would be like, hey, when's your next competition? I'm like, oh, nationals are in April. They're like, hey, what's the number we're looking for? I'm like, we're going to do 450. And so now, again, even people
you got to do
with,
450, yeah.
They know I'm coming up, and I
That's
get back,
awesome.
and if I come back and I didn't do 450, they're gonna, and you get the look, they're like, oh, and they're like, what'd you bench? I don't say I benched 430, and they go, eh.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm like, really?
And for people who don't know, once you really get over 300 pounds, jumping up your maxes are very, very difficult. So, 430 to 450 is an extreme jump, just for anybody that's not aware.
And the funny part is, I've got someone talking to me. I remember this very distinctly. I came back and I wanted to bench. I think the record was like 478 or something like that I was trying to break. And so I got back and I benched like 460. I missed the world record. I failed on it. And I get back, and this guy who, let me paint a brief picture. The guy's 45. He's like 5'7", weighs about 240. He's got like a 45-inch waist. He can't spell Jim. He thinks Jim is Jim. And he's like, so how'd you do, man? I'm like, I gave it a whirl, but I wasn't able to do it. He's like, well, what'd you end up with? I'm like, I benched 462 or whatever was the kilo equivalent. And he's like, 462. He goes, for just one rep. I was like, yeah, I was gonna triple it, but I got tired.
They only required one. Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't feel like doing
funny.
3.
That's funny.
Oh, geez.
That is funny. Well, that's
awesome.
so cool. I mean, forget my takeaway here is like, forget writing down your goals, forget all that. Just start talking about it and tell people. And naturally, I mean, you're gonna have to stay accountable to it. And I'll bet when you're in the gym and you got one more set and it's like, I don't, I'm tired. I want to just go home. Knowing that you told 15, 20 people about all that, that's going to push you to do that last set and finish up and whatever it is. And maybe it's not working out, but I mean, Brandon has, and I was like, dude, do you understand what you just did? On another episode, he talked about how we're going to get Grant Cardone on here within a year.
Yeah.
So now I just said it again.
Yeah. So we got it.
Not the thing.
Yeah. So Grant Cardone will be on the show within a year, and we like you said, you got to make it known and you got to make it happen. So
that's right.
That's for me. I've always been, I played basketball and I played basketball, competitively on up and through college and all that stuff. And I'm the guy that wants to take the last shot. I'm not passing that ball. Not that I'm a ball hog. It's just, I want that pressure.
Mm-hmm.
And I do well under pressure. It's so sort of innate that I find myself, and I had to kind of do a little self-assessment, but I find myself subconsciously like procrastinating in order to create more pressure or stress or tension. And so I can, you know, I can have that pressure, that stress, and I perform better. And am I successful every single time? No, of course not. But
That's cool.
over time, it's just, you know, that's how it works for me. I would carry around, I got a little, you know, one of these little doodads here, like little tiny things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Stick it in your pocket. When I was preparing for nationals, I would carry this around, and at the end of the day, every day, I would write down 5 things I did to get to where I need to be for nationals or the worlds or whatever
Wow.
it is. I would print out index cards that had the weight that I wanted to bench, and I would put it on my steering wheel in my car. I would put it on the monitor at work, and I would put it on the mirror in front of my sink. So when I'm brushing my teeth in the morning, I see that number. When I'm driving back and forth to work, I see that number. I see it all the time.
Oh,
I love that.
I love it.
Yeah.
That's perfect. And you know, it could kind of sound like we went off on something completely unrelated to anything business or, you know, but I think that ties really back to anything in your life, to be honest.
That's right.
Whether it be the weightlifting, whether it be school, business, family, there's all sorts of connections that could be made to that. And I think that's valuable.
You know, absolutely. And honestly, it goes back to something we talked about earlier about taking the leap and not even knowing what the heck I was going to do next.
Right.
Part of the accomplishments in weightlifting and my mindset with that helped me be able to say, I know I can do this. You know, I've done some things. One of the things I did that made me successful with the weightlifting is I can cut weight like nobody's business. And so you weigh in and you have 24 hours until you compete.
Right.
And so, especially on the, believe it or not, there is a non-drug free side of powerlifting that literally they just don't drug test you.
Right.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Again, I was not part of that, but so on the drug free side, you know, you can't take anything to help you lose weight. Well, I got to the point where I don't half-ass anything. I'm like, you know what? This could be a big advantage for me. Like I can weigh in and put weight back on.
Absolutely.
And they have weight classes for a reason, right?
Like a boxer.
Right. And so I got to the point where, you know, I could pretty routinely drop 15 pounds in 24 hours.
Wow.
And
that's impressive.
And then I'd put it back on. I knew how to, so the first couple of times I did it, I figured out the first part and I could cut the weight. And then I was really crappy at putting it back on. So then I felt like crap the next day. My performance suffered, et cetera. And then I finally got it nailed down where I had both sides of it. And it would be hilarious. I'd be in a weigh-in line, right? And I would always make sure I was first. So I'd time it out. I'd get up at 4:30 in the morning. So I'm there first in line and weigh in. And I'm sitting there and there's someone next to me. And I've cut, you know, say 15 pounds in the last 24 hours. And some guy sitting next to me, and he's like, oh man, I'm struggling, man. I had to cut weight. I'm like, oh yeah, I hear you, man. I'm like, how much weight did you cut? He's like, dude, I've dropped 6 pounds in the last week.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh man, that sucks. That's tough.
Right.
I just dropped 6 pounds in this conversation here. So.
Right. But same thing, that mental discipline that's required to be able to do that. And I'm not trying to pat myself on the back. I'm just lending it to the overall message is, you know, once you're able to do things like that, you know, I look back on things like that and like, dude, if I can do that, I can do this. Fill in the blank, whatever this is, whatever the next thing is.
That's so true. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are some of your back to the whole biz, you know, Mr. Biz, all that stuff. What are some of your endeavors and things you're working on moving forward?
Yeah. So I'm trying to, you know, as best I can get out of obscurity, get out in there and meet more people and be able to help more people. That's why I started my second business. So my original business is, you know, the one-on-one fractional CFO type stuff. What was happening is I had business come to me that needed the help, but they didn't have the revenue to support really hiring me. So it was like, okay, well, as your future potential CFO, I would tell you it's not a good financial decision to hire me because you can't afford it.
Right.
And so I helped a couple businesses for free. And it's like, well, I can't sustain that, obviously. So how do I do that? And so what I came up with is I created a continuity model, a membership model. So where like Mr. Biz Solutions it's a membership. So you pay a flat amount a month, excuse me. And then I can scale my time. I come on and do Zoom sessions, help people with their business.
Oh, nice.
And then I've got, you know, an attorney that comes on once a month. They answer legal questions. I have a website guy who comes on once a month that answers questions about excuse me, websites. I have a digital marketing guy comes on once a month. I've got, a whole series of experts that come on, trying to, as best I can, give like one-stop shopping for a lot of business owners that they got one legal question, or they think, should I trademark my slogan? Do I need to trademark my logo? Things like that, where they can ask an attorney once a month instead of paying $250 to sit down for an hour with an attorney. They can have that one-stop shopping. So that I've got the online course that I do. It's a 5-week course where we've got there's professional videos I mentioned once a week on 5 different topics that are important for financial success in your business. And then I do a Zoom session to talk about that week's lesson and answer specific questions about each individual business and things like that. I got another book that's in rough draft form. So a 3rd book will be coming out early next year. That's it.
That's great. No, that's all good stuff. Building that content and just having that something for everyone, because everybody, we all businesses come from different points on the compass. So
Sure.
having those models, that's awesome. I love that.
Yeah. All right. Well, Mr. Biz, I think we're going to jump into our Moments of Truth segment here. It's the same 7 questions we ask all of our guests, and we're just going to get rolling with the first one. Who is your success role model?
Success role model. Honestly, I would probably say it's kind of an odd answer. My grandfather.
Okay.
My grandfather, who dropped out of school in 7th grade.
Wow.
He dropped out of school, faked his age to be able to go into the military, got out and started plopping out kids like it was nobody's business. Ended up having 8 kids.
Wow.
Didn't have.
So they call them the baby boomers for a reason.
Oh
right?
my gosh. I used to joke when I first got married, we weren't ready to have kids yet. I'm like, hey, fertile Frank, stay away from it.
Right.
But so this guy who dropped out of school in like middle school, gets out of the military, comes out and starts having kids and has got to support his family, went and got his GED, went to like HVAC school so he can become an HVAC technician, did that for a while, learned how to become a mechanic, like learned all these things, was working 3 jobs, like he was a master or a jack of all trades, master of none. And could he like put together a proper grammar and spelling in a paragraph? Absolutely not. But that dude knew like everything. Like I felt like he was an encyclopedia of knowledge. And so his success, I mean, he did what he had to do. He had 8 kids to support, and one job's not going to cut it. So I need to get another job. Well, I don't have the money. Well, let me save up money so I can go become a TV repairman so I could have 2 jobs. And,
he just figured it out.
He just figured it out, and he didn't stop. He just kept going to be able to support his family, to be able to have 8 kids and all that kind of stuff. So sort of an odd thing to say, not some big, business tycoon or anything like that. But I've always really looked up to him, and I think thankfully I've gotten some of his traits.
That's really good.
That's awesome.
What's your biggest success?
Biggest success? That's a tough one.
Besides benching over 500 pounds. I mean, that's insane.
Honestly, I'm a big family guy. I would say my biggest success is, it's not about me so much. It's the kids we're raising. Hopefully we're raising good kids, and we've got 3 girls, and
nice.
Hopefully that'll be the legacy is, putting 3 awesome human beings out into the world and having them be successful, and whatever their definition of success is.
Yeah, that's great. And you're always focusing on the future. That's the great part.
That's cool.
The kids are the future, and that's awesome. What's a typical day for you look like?
There is none.
No.
There is.
What time do you get up?
I get up at 5:40.
Okay.
5:40 every day, and that's mainly because my wife is a nurse. She gets up at 5:40, so I get up with her.
Okay.
Same time she does. The problem lies in that I'm a recovering night owl. So
I feel your pain. I work at night as well. So
and I everyone goes, so I don't want to miss family time. And so I said, with 3 kids, we had all kind of stuff going on in the evenings typically. But once everyone goes to bed, I can sneak down to my home office. And once I get rolling, like, just stay out of the way.
Right.
And all of a sudden I look up, I feel like my home office is like Vegas, like there's no clocks.
Right.
Of course, there's a clock right in the bottom
The
corner of my
computer, yeah,
laptop,
just
but
put some tape over that.
all of a sudden I look up and I'm like, crap, it's 2 a.m. and I'm getting up in 3 hours and 40 minutes. Like I got to go to bed, but no, there's no typical day. I try to have a typical week, but even that gets derailed as far as, trying to have office days on as best I can on Fridays and Mondays so I can catch up from the weekend as well as prepare for the weekend and, kind of get things nailed down and try to handle all my client stuff Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, but it doesn't always work that way. But every day is different. There's not really one set thing. And that's part of what I like about it.
Yeah, that's cool. I love that. What's your favorite quote?
I would say I got a tie. I can't narrow it down to one. I got a tie. So one is, and I'm not a huge Star Wars guy or anything like that. So this probably make you think it, but is Yoda, and that is do or do not. There is no try.
Mm.
And again, I think it goes back to there's either no ass or full ass. Like I used to correct people, and I still do it all the time when they say, "Yeah, I'm going to try to make it." Are you going to make it or not?
Yep.
Commit and make it happen. Like, when you say I'm going to try, you're already giving yourself an out. You're already saying, I probably won't. And if I don't, it's okay. Cause I only said I was going to try. I didn't say I was going to do it.
Yeah. My dad growing up, I would say that same thing. I would say, I'll try to do this or that or whatever. And he would say, try not, do.
Yeah.
So it was always that Yoda thing.
Yeah. One way I counteract that, instead of saying try, I'll say I'll do my best, because then, it still kind of puts an out, but it's just, I'll say do my best instead of try. Cause
and the tie is, the other one is a Steve Jobs quote, which is somewhat related, but is, if you don't ask, the answer is always no.
That's very true.
Honestly, it ties into Grant Cardone. You're going to have Grant Cardone on the show, right?
Yeah.
If you don't ever reach out to that dude,
that's right, the
answer is always going to be no. And if someone might tell you, like, you can't tweet to him, he's not going to answer you. And then 2 weeks later, he's on your show.
Exactly.
Whoever told you that goes, holy shit, how'd you do that? You just never know. I mean, that story that I heard Steve Jobs tell about that quote, he was 12 or 13 years old, and he reached out to Bill Hewlett, who ran Hewlett Packard.
Yeah, HP.
Yeah, and he was like, "Hey, man, I'm trying to build some stuff. Do you have any spare parts I can use?" And he's like, this was a million years ago. He looked him up in the freaking yellow pages, white pages, whatever, and called him. As a 12 or 13-year-old. Like, again, most people would say, you can't call the guy who's president of Hewlett Packard.
Right.
He did. He goes, not only to give me the parts, but he gave me a job during the summer.
No kidding.
And that started Steve Jobs' path down the technology pathway. So
wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, you got to ask, like you said. We'll once we get a little bit more, we'll start hitting up Grant Cardone. So
I will tell you, for any fathers out there, preaching that to your children can come back and bite you right in the rear end, though. Because our oldest daughter will come to me sometimes and she'll ask me for something outrageous, and I'll be like, no, why would you ask me? She'll be like, Dad, you don't ask me something. No, and I'm like, yeah, you're right. You're right.
You taught me that, Dad. That's funny.
That's fun. What are some of your hobbies?
Working out, although like I said, I've been pretty much a slacker with that the last couple of years. But working out, family stuff, some of the normal stuff, family stuff, big into that. I enjoy sports a lot. I don't watch as much sports as I used to. I think it's just not the same priority for me. I used to have 5 fantasy football teams and all that. Now I'm down to 1, and I'm not even doing well this year, so that's kind of a bad subject. But I don't pay as much attention to those. But mostly just family stuff. And honestly, it makes me sound like a workaholic, which I don't think I am. But kind of my hobby is what I do for a living, because I love it so much.
I totally can relate to that. And that's a perfectly acceptable answer. When you like what you're doing, like you said, you feel like this is what you were made to do.
Yeah.
And it doesn't feel like work. It's that whole cliche. So yeah, that's cool. What is the best business book that you've read?
Best business book. Well, of course, I would say Pathway to Profits by me, but
I was going to say,
I
you
wrote
can
it.
say your own. Yeah.
I wrote it, so that's probably completely unfair. No, honestly, I really enjoyed the 10X Rule by Grant Cardone.
Yeah.
Cardone. I can tell you're a Cardone guy.
Yeah, I am kind of, sort of. I mean, his sales methods. I'm more of a pull sales guy than push.
Yep, that's how I am.
But that's what I was just talking to someone. I recommend that book to everybody, and I was talking to someone, and they're like,
It's an
"Well,
awesome book.
I knew that he didn't care for Cardone," and I'm like, "Yeah, you got to check out the 10X Rule." And he's like, "Who wrote that? It sounds familiar." And I go, "Grant Cardone." And he goes, "Eh." I said, "This book has nothing to do with sales.
Yeah.
Like, it's not the sales thing. Like that's Sell or Be Sold. That's, a bunch of other books he's got. The 10X Rule is all mindset." I said, "I'm telling you, if you read that book and you don't feel like running through a wall for your goals, then you need to reread it, or you must have fallen asleep halfway through it or something."
That's right.
I think it's super powerful.
Yeah, agreed.
Good book. It's sitting on my bookshelf, actually. So, but last question here. If there's one key piece of advice you could leave our listeners with about achieving success, what do you think it would be?
Commit and make it happen. It kind of goes back to that quote, do or do not. And I keep saying it sounds funny, and it is funny, but I don't half-ass anything. If I can't be fully committed, like all in, I don't want to be involved at all, because I feel like that's the only way for me to achieve success in whatever it is. I pour myself into things. When I get into something, when I got into powerlifting, it's like I graduated high school. I was 6 foot tall. I was 150 pounds.
Wow.
And I competed it and got up to all the way up to 230. I mean, I was pretty much a fat ass at that point, but nonetheless, but I commit to stuff. And so I would tell that to people. And again, as I alluded to much earlier, is I think everyone has that in them. If you fully commit to something, you're going to be successful. You might not think you can, but I promise you have it in you. If you really, really, like, there's no plan B. I'm going to do this. You will be successful. And I think if you take assessment of yourself, as I said earlier, the couple of times maybe in your life that you've done that, you were successful. I'd be willing to bet you.
Yeah.
So good and so true.
Very true. So Ken, how can our listeners get in contact with you? I know you said you got a few books. Where can they get the books, and
what are the names?
All about you.
Just you can go out to Amazon. The first book's called How to Be a Cash Flow Pro. Second book is, and it's all about cash flow. Shocker, right? The second one's called Pathway to Profits. Cover a bunch of different topics about things that are required to be successful business. It's not all financial. Some of it's other stuff as well, like how to hire better people faster, things like that, which is a challenge for all business owners. Those are the two books. Online course, you can go out to MrBizProgram.com and check that out. That's just a website that shows you kind of how the program works and all that kind of stuff. MrBizSolutions.com is the website you can go check out the continuity program there. And follow me on social media. I put out content, like tons of content, like at least Monday through Friday on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on our Facebook page, and what am I missing? On Twitter.
So if they search Mr. Biz, they should be able to find you.
Yeah, you search Mr. Biz, you'll find me. Yeah, for
beautiful.
Sure.
Awesome. Well, Mr. Biz, we appreciate you being on the show today. I'd love to have this conversation, and there's a lot to take away from the conversation. And for our listeners, go check out Mr. Biz's websites and connect with him on social media. Get his books. I know I'm going to work on getting some books from him. Amazon as well. And don't forget, subscribe to our show so that you're not missing any of our daily episodes. And join us on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/wealth junkies. Again, Ken, we appreciate you being on the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. I really appreciate it. It was a great time.
Absolutely. Thanks, Ken.